Good morning, homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm, or welcome back. It is the 7th of May, so early May, and I thought I'd give you a quick garden tour. We don't have a whole lot in the ground yet because it's still early days for us here in Southeast Washington, but I do have a few things going, and I thought I would just give you a tour just because it's fun. So starting out in the greenhouse, and if you've been following along with me this spring, I've done several videos in here. So we just did a plant sale last Sunday, and so this is some of what I have left that is either things I'm just growing for me or things that still need to go in the ground or that didn't sell at the event. So here we have celery. I try to grow a little bit of celery every year, and it holds really well, and then I process some of it and just chop it and freeze it so that I have it for off-season months. I've got Sahara Rudbeckia here, and I've got a whole nother flat of this somewhere else. Growing a couple of different kinds of hibiscus this year, and so this is Luna hibiscus. I'm really excited to see how this does this year. These are a couple of echinaceas that I had. Just threw some extra seed in the ground. This is Queen Lime Zinnia, which is one of my very favorite zinnias. Great big, tall, beautiful combination of colors. Marjoram. Marjoram is basically a more floral version of oregano and very nice in seasoning mixes, and I think it's kind of a misused or misunderstood herb and people don't grow it. I'm not quite sure why. It smells amazing, and it is a tender annual, so it will not survive a frost, but we've got some of those going. In the back here, I've got a little bit of cilantro and za'atar. Za'atar is a wild version of an oregano. If you've ever heard of the za'atar spice mix, this is what it was originally made from. And so za'atar spice mix is the wild za'atar herb and then sumac and sesame seeds and a little bit of salt. And I've been growing that for a couple of years. Very fun. It is a tender perennial, so if you get a really cold winter, it will not survive. I usually have a few that survive the winter here in Zone 7A. Lots of sweet basil here. This is always a good seller for me, so I have a lot of this. I did sell quite a bit already, and these are really ready to go in the ground, but we've had a really cold week, so I haven't wanted to plant anything out. Flatleaf parsley, which in my opinion is much more flavorful than the curly parsley, and so this is the Italian flatleaf that I always grow. Some much larger cilantros that I have here. That'll be chopped and frozen mostly because cilantro doesn't like heat, and so it's not going to survive. A few extra nasturtiums. I have a bunch of these on my front porch planted out, but these were the extras that I didn't have room for yet. This is the melons that you guys, if you were following along, saw me plant last week, and we have some that are just starting to come up, so not everybody is up yet. It's been super cold at night. Haven't been out of the 40s at night in here, and so that is slowing everything way down. I should have put these in my warmer germination chamber, and I didn't. This is Italian zucchini, just starting to break the surface of the soil there, and then this is very exciting. Hopefully you guys are going to be able to see this. This is the tobacco that is super, super tiny seeds, and it needs light to germinate. And so I wasn't sure if it was gonna germinate because I put some perlite over the top of that, but it is just, I'm looking in there and I'm just starting to see little green. So we are getting some germination on that. That's very exciting. This is Signet Marigold. This one is yellow, and these are a small, fairly compact plant, small flowers, and edible. I'm hoping to do some edible flower sales to restaurants this year. A couple of sprouting sweet potatoes that I've taken many starts off at this point, and I just didn't have the heart to throw them out, so I threw them in here. They're not very happy because it's cold. They've been in my germination chamber. Some larger Jolly Jester marigolds, and then a few saved seeds from other marigolds. I love to put those out in the garden. They're just fun to see. This is more of the Sahara Rudbeckia, so I have lots of that. That's going to be really pretty, and I'm going to plant it en masse. Here are my tomatoes that are going into my own garden that are getting really big. I need to move those flats over because they're running out of room right there. But they are going to get planted out this weekend. Up top here, these are the herbs that I specifically saved so that I didn't accidentally sell them at the plant sale that I had. So we've got more marjoram, parsley, dill, cilantro in there. Here are some of my sweet potato starts. I lost the tops of these because they were in a germination chamber, and then I put them out here and they weren't happy being planted, but I think they're going to be fine and recover. And I hadn't rooted them. I literally just took them off the plants and put them in wet dirt, but they root super easily. In the back there, hopefully you can see that, are more hibiscus. And so I'm excited. This is the kind of hibiscus that you actually make tea out of. It is a perennial in the right climates. It's going to be annual for me here unless I put it in something where I take it inside during the winter. But I'm excited to see if I can actually get some flowers off of that because that's a really fun idea. Here's the actual sweet potato starts that did root and have been planted out, and they're much happier and a little more compact and doing well. Various onions that I planted from seed. I have a whole video on planting onion from seed and why you should plant them from seed rather than from sets or plant starts. I think this is a much better method. I didn't get great germination on some of these this year, but those will be going out in a week or two. And then here we have on the other side cherry Rudbeckia, so a different Rudbeckia, not quite as robust, but I'm excited for those. Put a few of those out. And then this is a different kind of zinnia. It's a little more compact. Jim Baggett zinnia. A friend of mine had a peach-colored zinnia in her backyard garden last year that I just completely fell in love with, and I can't find seeds for that specific variety. She didn't know what it was, but this one has a peach in the mix, and so I'm hoping for that. And I did collect some seed from her plant, and it did not germinate, so I don't think the seeds were quite mature enough. She'd been deadheading and they weren't quite ready. This is from a friend. This is Japanese black trifle tomato. It's in a bigger pot. It's much happier. I'm excited to put that one out this year. I tried to grow that last year and it turned out it was the wrong seed in the wrong packet. And so what I grew was not that variety, so I'm excited to actually try it. Tomatillos and one pepper that are for a customer that we're just waiting for her to come pick those up. I've got a little bit of coleus in here, and those have been fun. They've been growing very slowly because they like heat and it hasn't been very warm, but I love all the different colors, and I do have a couple of pots of that planted out. This is leftover tomatoes that are still for sale. In the back here, I have all of my peppers that I'm going to be growing for my own use. A couple of flats of those. And then eggplant that is also for sale. Littlefinger and Rosa Bianca. So I have a few of those left, and again, back in the back there. Those are the peppers that are going to go into my own garden, and I'll show you where those are going to go here in a minute. Here's some of the coleus. And this poor pot, I've actually had this pot for probably 15 years. I bought it at a Mexican outdoor garden and market in somewhere in New Mexico, and it is surprisingly held up incredibly well given its age. But I've had problems with the horns breaking off, and so we glued it and it fell apart, and then we've glued it again with a different glue. So hopefully this will survive one more season. I love this little pot, and I'm totally surprised at how well it's held up. A couple of more compact marigolds out here in pots. This is all of my lavender. I have 3 different lavenders in here, and they definitely struggled. You can see this whole section right here is just dead. They struggled with the cold that we had last winter. We got down to -12, which is unusually cold for here. It was a brief cold, but we didn't have a lot of snow cover, and so some of these fared better than others. I have 3 different varieties of lavender in here, and a lot of dead on them that got cut off this spring, but they're all still alive. In here, in very small little guys, these are dianthus. And I think this is orange sherbet, so I'm excited to see how that does. I'll put the name on the screen for this one. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I grew this last year, and I had it in a pot that was too crammed with other things, and it got shaded out, and so it bloomed, but it wasn't very pretty. It looked really straggly, and so I'm hoping for better results this year. I would like to give it one more try. More dianthus and some galaxy-type petunias in this pot. I love those galaxy petunias, and I'm hoping that that orange sherbet dianthus and those purple petunias are going to go really well together once everything gets going. This is a salvia that is a perennial that last year did not bloom at all, but this year has bloomed a lot. I'll show you a much more mature version of that that's blooming like crazy right now. I have a couple of dahlias in here. This one came up almost immediately, and this one is just sprouting right now. So that took like 3 weeks longer than this one to come up. And I've been protecting this from the cold. Dahlias don't like freezing weather. And then I have volunteering in here. I had snapdragons in here last year, and so I've got a bunch of volunteer snapdragons in there. I have so many snapdragons this year that I just need to weed those out. I don't need them. Over on this side, speaking of snapdragons, this is snapdragons. I have 3 different mixes. One called Cherry Twist, one called Sunrise, and one called Berry Mix. And so I can't remember which one of these it is, but I've got pots of all 3 of them. I'm excited for that. Here's another one of those salvias that got kind of buried in a perennial bed and shaded out last year. And I had a lavender here that died. And so that's going to go in there and live there as a perennial. Here are my other 2 lavenders. These 2 and the one that died, these were all lavender Munstead. And I was surprised at how much these died back, because they have been in the ground and well established for at least 4 or 5 years. And boy, they did not like that cold snap. We really got hit hard. This is a volunteer feverfew that's coming up, and it's also reseeding all through here. And I'm mostly weeding it out because feverfew is something that I have a ton of, because once you plant it once, it never stops reseeding. In here, I have a couple of onions that actually fell off the racks in the greenhouse when I was drying onions in the fall. And these were on the ground and I hadn't seen them, and so I'm just gonna let them grow out for some seed. These are Cipollini's, and I just threw them in pots when I found them. A sad rosemary that will recover. Italian oregano, which is a little bit different from the Greek oregano. It's a little more frost tender, but better flavor. And I have a couple of pots of that. And then in this pot, these are Egyptian walking onions. And then reseeding in there is yarrow, and then also columbine. Once you get columbine established, if you've got the right conditions, it will reseed forever. This is columbine right here. It's just starting to get a bloom on it. We have some around the house itself that are blooming now, and I planted that there 4 or 5 years ago, and it's still coming up every year, and then I get babies from it all the time. This poor rosebush, this is I'll put the name on the screen. It's a little bit of a semi-wild rose. It is not a fussy cultivated rose, but it got whacked back really hard with the cold. That's true all over Walla Walla this year. A lot of people are having to cut their roses all the way back to the ground. And so this was a huge, huge rose bush, and it is now much, much smaller than it was. We gave it a big haircut. I need to give it one more haircut now that I'm seeing what's actually actively growing, but it'll survive. It'll come back and it's gonna be fine. And I did put this year for the first time some cardboard and some wood mulch around it just to keep the weeds down in here a little bit. Here we have more snapdragons of all 3 varieties. So very excited to do a mass planting of those out in the big garden. This is called Winter Fat, and it is a native perennial. And I had a bunch of native perennials that I had bought last fall, and most of them died in the winter, but this one is perfectly happy. So clearly very frost tolerant. I'm excited to get that in the ground. A couple of extra strawberries I had left over from when I planted out my green stock. More of the oregano. This is a baby almond. When I was cleaning up around my almond trees, I got almonds for the first time ever last year. I found a couple of almonds that had sprouted, and so I threw them in pots. I don't know if these are going to survive, but it was kind of a fun thing to do, and so we'll see. More rosemary. Most of these were overwintered either on my porch or in my house last year. Rosemary will die if it gets super cold, but I had these in protected places, and so they survived. This is just bok choy that I need to actually eat for dinner tonight. It's going to bolt. It's not happy in that pot. It's too big. And so we're done with that. I have a few more out in the garden I'll show you. Some extra kale, extra cabbage. I'm just going to throw those out into the big garden. This is tomatillo, and these look really, really terrible right now. I mean, look how awful that leaf looks. This is called edema. And I mean, there's another example. I mean, that just looks absolutely terrible. And you would look at this and you would think to yourself, that must be some kind of fungus or disease. There's no way. What's happening is this plant grows so fast that it sucks up too much water. and it causes the cells in the leaves themselves to swell and burst, and you get this kind of damage. Once you get this planted into the ground, it absolutely recovers and it's completely fine. And I kept having this happen every year in my greenhouse and could not figure out what was going on and thought it was some kind of disease. And then finally saw an internet post about this and my head blew up. I couldn't believe it that it was just edema. So now I don't worry about it much. I'm just excited to get these out into the garden. They are in pots that need to be bigger at this point. Tomatillos grow like weeds. They're a little bit more cold hardy than tomatoes. They won't survive a frost, but they're a little bit tougher than a tomato is in terms of the cold. And so I put these outside just to get some sunshine on them and hopefully help that edema a little bit. A little bit of alyssum that I grew from seed, 2 different varieties here, and it's interesting to see like how compact this one is and how leggy this one is. So it's just interesting to see how different cultivars do, which is fun. I've been tucking those into planters and pots all around the property. This is calendula. I have a ton of this growing out in the garden volunteering, but I have a few that I started from seed. This is flashback, which is my favorite one. Oh, here's that plant that I was trying to remember the name of. Agastache. I have a few more of those that I'll plant out, a couple of extra snapdragons that didn't quite fit in pots, a few more of the dianthus, some sage that overwintered that's getting ready to bloom in this pot, a little bit of thyme that overwintered, some chives, and then here's the rest of these natives. These are the ones that finally did survive. So Sandberg's bluegrass, I've got 2 of those, and then Idaho fescue, I have 3 of those that survived, but I had 5 of each. And then I had a whole bunch of other ones that just didn't make it. I think being in the pot where they weren't protected by the insulation of the ground, they just couldn't take the cold. This is a showy daisy. This is also a native, and I'm excited to plant this out in a spot where I have some other natives around a sycamore tree. Extra dill for sale, and then maybe planting out if I don't sell it. And then this is my sunflower bed this year. I have a big sunflower bed out in the big garden, but this was some special varieties that I had bought seed from because I'm a sucker for sunflower seeds, and every year I buy new ones. And I had my husband hit this with a tractor to dig out some of the ranunculus that is in there, scrape the soil, and then put some wood chips down. And so this is going to be a really pretty little bed of sunflowers. And I have the varieties in rows. And so this is one variety that's a mix. This is another variety that's a mix. And this one is chocolate cherry, I think is the name of this. So that's going to be really fun as those mature. This is ranunculus, also known as buttercup, and it is just starting to bloom. It's very pretty this time of year. It is toxic to livestock, and so it's not the kind of thing you want out in your pastures. Although in my experience, most livestock will not eat things that are toxic unless there is literally nothing else to eat. This spreads like wildfire. It spreads through rhizomes in the ground. It also spreads by seed. It came in on a nursery planter that we had, and I didn't know what it was, and we now have it all over the property. And so not the greatest thing in the world in terms of toxicity, but it's low growing. It doesn't poke you. It's very pretty when it blooms. It actually comes out pretty easily if you dig it out. It's not one of those perennials that is just a complete nightmare to try to eliminate. And so we've mostly just let it go, for better or worse. Speaking of natives, since we're here, this is called Virgin's Bower, and it is a native clematis. And I grew this, I collected some seed in the wild and grew it in pots from that seed, and it turns out it's pretty easy to grow. And so we put one at the base of this plant, put the name of this tree in the description. We always just call it the Z tree because I can never remember the name of it. A friend of mine gave me this because it was a volunteer on her property, and it has been in the ground here for 7 or 8 years. It's a very upright, kind of tulip-shaped plant, and it's in a good spot. And so we've really enjoyed having this here, and I didn't care if this Virgin's Bower, which is a climber, climbed up this tree, and so we're just letting it do its thing. All right, 2 hours later, various interruptions. Not nearly as lovely lighting, but we're gonna keep going. So here is our strawberry green stalk. that you saw me replant. They're put together a month or so ago, maybe more, and you can see my strawberries are starting to bloom, which is lovely. Lots of flowers going on here on some of these. I'm still fighting aphids. Oh, there's a spittle bug. And so intermittently, yeah, there's one. I don't know if you can see that, but there's an aphid on there. So just sporadically, I have aphids behind on the backside of some of these leaves. First time I've ever battled aphids on strawberries, unusual. And so this is a mix of something called Pyganic. It's a pyrethrin-based spray that I've just been leaving out here, hooked on here to spray occasional aphids issues that I see. Pyganic is a pesticide that will kill bees if you're not careful, and so I try to be sure to spray when I don't have a lot of bee activity, either really early or really late in the day. And I'm trying not to spray the flowers themselves, but to spray the leaves. Kills aphids on contact. But it has a little bit of a residual, which is why I like it for aphids, because in my experience, aphids, if you're just doing soapy water or if you're just trying to spray them off, they tend to come right back because they're actually in the soil. And so you might kill the adult generation, but the young generation immediately regrows and you just keep battling them. And so if you've got a little bit of a residual, it can help with some of that battle. This bed, there's nothing in here right now, obviously. I did have a bunch of worm composting that I scattered about in this bed, along with some old donkey manure and straw that I had in a horse stall that I threw in here probably 2 months ago now, give or take. And so I'm just letting that kind of compost in place. There was also a lot of leaves. We put a lot of leaves over these beds last fall, and so there's all kinds of stuff slowly breaking down in there. You can see the huge amount of eggshells that I have in here. These are not going to be anything that's going to give nutrition to this soil this year, but over time it will break down and add calcium to the soil. And then I have chicken wire over this, and any bed that I can get chicken wire over, just because my chickens will fly out of the area that they're supposed to be in and go on walkabout. They love these wood chips. They think the wood chips are fantastic, and they scrape through them looking for bugs and worms and whatnot. And in the process, they will get up in these beds and just completely shred whatever's in there. And so I'm trying to put chicken wire over things to keep the chickens out of the beds until things are established enough that it's not going to matter. So this bed is fully planted. This is a mix, a cool season crop, some of which will come out fairly quickly. I'll put the name of this on the screen. I can't remember. It's something from Baker Creek that I got from a seed swap. It's related to the bok choys. It's something different and great in a stir fry. This is the first time I've ever tried it. A friend of mine was actually looking for the seed at a seed swap, and strangely enough, it came in at the end of the day. And so I gave most of that seed pack from the seed swap to her, but I threw a couple in a pot just to try them. This damage that you're seeing here, that might be slugs. It might also be hail. We did have, or it could be chickens. Actually, the way that looks, that's probably chickens pecking at that. Little buggers. I do have a little bit of a slug issue, not huge out here, but so moving on, we have, this is having issues with the stem being a little bit floppy. That is a Chinese broccoli, which throws up really small little flower clusters, so not a big head of broccoli, and it's done very quickly. So this will be finished in a month, probably. And so I've got 4 or 5 of those in there just for some quick stir fries. This is pak choi. And you can see, if you look down in here, try to get my shadow out of the picture. If you look down in there, you can see that's already starting to go to seed. Pak choi is a very, very short season crop. It's very fast and it tends to bolt very quickly. And so it's the kind of thing you want to get in and then harvest it as soon as you think it's probably ready. All of these, honestly, are ready to go. I will harvest this one first because that's the one that is really starting to go to seed. You can see that, but they're all starting to. This one is doing the same thing. So 3 or 4 pak choys in there, quick, short season, and then we'll be done. The rest of this bed, I have 2 cabbage, And I know right now that seems like a ton of room, but they are going to spread out. I find cabbage needs at least 18 inches between plants. This is a 4-foot bed this way, and so I wanted to give them some room. 2 broccoli plants, and those will have a nice head on them, and then they'll have side shoots. And so I should get a nice crop of broccoli off of that over the course of about a month. I'm surprised more people don't grow broccoli. I have a great blog post on how to grow broccoli. It's tricky in terms of getting the timing right because it's a cool season crop, but worth doing for sure. And then I have 2 Russian kales. We have Russian kale 1, Russian kale 2, and then 2 lacinato kales, also called dino kale. I have 2 of those, and then 2 Swiss chards in there as well. The kale and the chard will be in for the entire season. The broccoli will be in until at least mid-July. The cabbage probably until mid-July, and then everything in the back of this bed will come out early. See what I did there? I planted the things that were going to get harvested first on one end of this bed so that I could replant with other things in here as soon as this stuff comes out. So I'll have room in the bottom of the bed. At the end of this row, I have a little planter. This is some of that Signet Marigold that I was talking about. And then these are Johnny Jump Ups, which are basically violas. Those are both edible, and so I'm hoping that's just a nice little edible crop to be able to harvest. We'll see how the violas do. They don't like heat, and they were started from seed, so they're a little bit small, but we might get a small crop out of those. And then tucked down in here in the corner, right here, is another one of those dianthus. And then here is a California poppy. I had some poppies that I started from seed this year, and I just tucked them in kind of in fun places all around the garden. This is probably right here. That's a California poppy from last year. I don't know quite where that came from, but I'm happy to see it. It's fine. This is my garlic bed. You guys have seen many shots of this over the last couple of months. It's looking really good. This was planted very late October, and it will come out probably right around the beginning of July. I have 5 different kinds of garlic in here. I was growing huge amounts of garlic, and I decided to scale way back on that this year, and so this is just for my personal use. Tucked into the corner here on the south side with a little bit of a trellis from a piece of leftover hug panel. These are sweet peas. I planted sweet peas, you may remember, in the green stock last year in a fall, and it turns out that sweet peas, they're triggered to flower by day length, and so I never got a crop out of those because I planted them too late in the season. So I'm hoping that these will climb the trellis and kind of spill out of this bed on this side, and that should be fun. And then I'm not sure what's going to go in here when the garlic comes out. Probably more brassicas, so probably cauliflower, more broccoli, fall crop. On this end, interestingly, last year I had a lot of herbs here, including an herb called nigella, and it didn't do terribly well. I got it in too late, and it was very small, and it didn't bloom very much, and I just ignored it. I never got around to harvesting it, and you can see it's reseeded in here, and what a surprise. So evidently, nigella, if you're trying to grow it, it's a little tricky. I find it hard to germinate, but the trick is to just let it winter sow, basically. And so I've got a bunch of that in here, which is kind of fun. And then this is borage, and I have a bunch of it right here, just volunteering as well. I may throw some of these in pots and move them around. Borage also has an edible flower, and so I'm hoping that will be part of those edible flowers that we get. And there's just a few of them in here. I'm not sure why this one was yellow. It's obviously some kind of a nutritional thing going on, but I'm not worried about it because it's a volunteer, and I'll probably just end up pulling this one out anyway. But borage, last year or the year before, I planted some of these just in the corner of these beds in kind of an extra space, knowing that it would reseed, and that's what's happening, and that's completely fine. So great fun. In this bed, this was beans last year, and I am going to put, I meant to say, this bed is going to be all of my peppers this year. So that's going to be a pepper bed. They will probably go in this weekend. So that's ready to plant. This is the blooming version of the salvia that I was showing you earlier, the perennial that didn't bloom last year. Look how gorgeous this is. I must say, I am quite in love with this salvia. It's supposed to be perennial. It overwintered in this big pot. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but I really love it. It's just gorgeous. And so I'm really enjoying that. I did throw a couple of more of these little Johnny Jump Ups in there as well, just to fill in that space. I had way too much stuff in here last year. I planted this planter with like 5 things. And this year, the only thing in here is the salvia and a couple of Johnny Jump Ups. Another poppy that I threw in the corner here. This one is more of a typical Shirley red poppy. Here's another dianthus over here. Here's some more borage volunteering. And then I have random strawberries. Once upon a time, before I put these raised beds in, this was a strawberry pasture. And I had a lot of strawberries out here. You can see these guys over here are starting to have fruit on them. I did have a couple of ripe berries, but I think the chickens came through and ate them. I need to throw a little wire over that. But I've got a few volunteer strawberries. They're June bearing varieties versus the strawberries in this green stalk are ever bearing. So different kind of strawberry altogether. This bed, a lot of leaf compost still on here. Some leftover other compost still kind of doing its thing. I think I'm gonna put my zucchini in here this year. I haven't 100% decided on this bed what's going to happen. And then along the edges on the trellis, you can see our livestock panel trellis, I have peas. And so I can't remember, I know I grew both a snow pea and a regular shelling pea. And these were both new varieties for me this year. I'll put their name on the screen. And so just trying these out. I did get really good germination. Timing on peas here is really hard because if it's too cold, they won't germinate. They take forever. And we're cold for a good long time. And then if it's too hot, they just bolt and never really form much of a crop before everything goes to hell. And so, but I think I've got the timing right on these guys, so excited to see how those do. This side isn't doing quite as well, but you can see all along this edge here. And honestly, these have been in for at least a month, so it's been a little cold. They've been kind of fussy, and I'm waiting for them to really start growing dramatically. Hopefully that's going to happen soon. The rest of this bed is 3 or 4 different kinds of spinach. And then the backside is lettuce. And then when the lettuce and spinach is finished, which it will be fairly soon, I'm gonna put beets and carrots in here as my primary. And then what's growing out here, these are hollyhocks that I grew in here last year that did not flower last year. Last year this was squash, and the hollyhocks kind of got shadowed. And this year they are very happy and very big. The reason for the netting on this bed is we have a terrible problem here with leaf miners. And leaf miners is actually a type of fly. And so it flies, it looks like a house fly except smaller. And they lay their eggs, and then the eggs climb into the leaf of the spinach crop. It's also true of chard, also true of beets. And so you'll see leaf miner damage on all 3 of those. I ruined my whole spinach crop last year. Okay, can you see? There's a little... You see that little fly right there? That's probably one of our leaf miner flies. So they can smell that spinach. They are trying to get in there. There's also some big old house flies in here. Those are not the same thing, but flies is a very diverse insect species. And so I'm trying hard to keep them off of the spinach. I did originally have the netting over the top of these hollyhocks, and then I had to just tuck it in around the base because the hollyhocks were having a growth spurt and getting way too big. Yeah, so lettuce and spinach in here, early season crop. They will be done pretty soon. Trying this year really hard to just harvest stuff. I tend to wait too long to harvest my spinach, thinking it's going to get a little bigger, it's going to get a little bigger, and then it's too much for me to eat, and so we don't eat it all before it goes bad. And so this year I'm trying to harvest it even when it's small and letting other things mature so that I don't waste it. And then lastly, this bed is again, leaves and compost at this point with some chicken wire over it to keep everything off. what's going to go in here is all of those sweet potatoes that you saw in the greenhouse. So this is going to be a big sweet potato bed, and I'm really excited about it. I have lots and lots of sweet potato slips. I did 1 year successfully grow sweet potatoes, and then I've had a lot of dud years where I didn't have enough soil nutrition, and for whatever reasons the conditions weren't quite right, and so it just didn't really do anything. So I'm hoping for this year for a good crop. They do need quite a bit of nutrition. This is some of the worm compost from this year's worm bin. Again, more eggshells, but that's going to get spread onto this bed to give it some extra nutrition as well. In the back here, we have a lot of comfrey, which needs to be, it's a chop and drop kind of a crop. A lot of that needs to be chopped and dropped at this point because it's getting quite large and getting ready to flower, and I definitely don't need more of this. And then this little apple tree is called a pearmain apple, and it's doing pretty well this year. I didn't have much in the way of flowers on it, but I'm excited to have that tree mature. And then buried in the back here, this is a rhubarb. And this rhubarb, I got this as a start from my mother-in-law, and it does not send up a flower stalk. I'm not sure what the variety is. Really beautiful color in there, so really great color. But this one never sends up a flower stalk, and the ones in my big garden always send up a flower stalk. So I've tried to research that. I've never been able to find anything definitive, but clearly there are some types of rhubarb that are sterile or that aren't triggered to flower easily, and there are other types that just always flower every year. It doesn't hurt the quality of the rhubarb itself to have it flower. And then this big green guy back here, this is a horseradish. And I have 3 or 4 of these randomly around the property. Sometimes I had it in pots and it rooted out the bottom of the pot, and so the root in the ground is still there. I did not harvest this last year, and so it's very happy this year. And I'm just going to do a chop and drop of all of this comfrey around here and throw it down as a slowly composting fertilizer. Along this hedge here, this is all hops. This particular variety is called Willamette, and they're a really nice kind of ale hop. Sometimes we get around to burning all the dead stuff off from the previous year. This year we did not. This is, at this point, very self-perpetuating, and you can do cuttings and grow lots and lots from cuttings along the ground. They're edible when they're small. It's a little bit like asparagus. Every year I think I'm going to get around to trying that, and every year I don't. The problem with it is they can be somewhat invasive, and so they do like to climb out across the garden, and so I really have to keep those in check in order to make sure that they don't take over the planet and climb up the apple tree, etc. So it can be a little tricky, but a really nice green hedge, and it will die all the way back to the ground in the wintertime. And so in the winter, this is open, and then in the summer, it's a nice visual barrier. So that's the raised bed garden this year. Let's go take a look at the big garden and see how that's doing. Part 2 coming soon. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.